Let's try this one more time. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Thank you. It's a little bit better. Thank you. Welcome to Congresso. And we appreciate you coming out here tonight, and we appreciate this new partnership with Engaging Men of Color Initiative. And with that, we are proud to be part of this new partnership, with you guys, and to welcome this new thing for me that I've heard you talking about, the storytelling about the opioid crisis in the city of Philadelphia. So now thank you for bringing that here to our community up here in the city of Philadelphia. If I talk too fast, just let me know and I'll slow down just a little bit. All right? Okay, so moving forward, this is very endearing to me because of the work that I do in this field. I work in the HIV field at Congresso over at 216 West Somerset Street. Some of you I have seen before, and I've collaborated before with Billy, and I remember Miss Pamela. Hey, how you doing? One of the things that we see every day that while we're out here in the field is that we see men of color that are struggling with the opioid epidemic here. And a lot of times it's not people that we see like in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. The ages have actually, for us, that we've seen have actually dropped. They're like in the teens now. We've come across one individual who was a Latino teenager, 13 years old. Didn't have any problems at home, but he got with the wrong crowd. And he started using heroin because he had back pain. And he just couldn't deal with it. And he was just out getting high. So another thing that we also see is this, that a lot of times that when we identify men of color that are HIV positive, right, their biggest struggle is not to get help with their new diagnosis. They actually want to go into a drug and alcohol program first to get help. And with that, they're faced with a lot of stigma, racism. People look down on them, they get belittled, they get made fun of with the staff at some of the facilities, so then they get discouraged and then they leave. So that makes our job a lot harder because when we say we want you to go to this place or we'll take you to this place, that they choose. And when they get there and instead of being like, no, we want you to stay, then we have a dialogue with these people there at the facilities, letting them know, this person needs help. How are you going to help them? Because the first thing that we need to do is that their first request is they want to get help for the drug and alcohol addiction, but they also need to get help for the HIV. So we're bringing them here to you first. So with the destruction over here that we call under the bridge off of Mudder in Indiana, that's when over the summer of last year, where they had what we call under the bridge. That was where we also call Tent City, where a lot of people that was on the opioids with the heroin, fentanyl, they were actually getting high up under the railroad tracks. And these were people that were coming from different neighborhoods, not this North Philadelphia, not Tioga, not Fishtown. They were coming from New Jersey, from Trevor's, coming down here, people that were working had nice jobs, gradually getting high. And because we tested there so much, we watched them on a slow decline on how they went from being a robust individual to being someone humped over, and then losing their jobs, trying to make a living to provide for their drug use. And most of the times what they did that they didn't do before, that a lot of the men become sex workers, not because that they enjoy doing it, but to support their habit. So with you guys being here, this is a wonderful opportunity again. So if you're here from out in the streets, we welcome you. We have lots of information, resource tables in the back from Congresso. We have a goodie table. We have lots of programs that we have. We have, I see Penn Medicine, Department of Behavioral Health, Intellectuals, Disability Services. I never knew what the I was until tonight. I got it right tonight, God darn. So thank you and welcome to Congresso.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Gabriel Bryant, and I want to say welcome to our next Beyond Expectations, focusing on the opioid epidemic. I am the coordinator for the Engaging Men of Color, or EMOC initiative at DBHIDS. Our work is designed to promote mental wellness for men and boys of color. First of all, I want to acknowledge our commissioner who couldn't be here this evening, David Jones, as well as our deputy commissioner, Roland Lamb, who will be speaking shortly. Good for Roland Lamb, please. They really provided tireless support for EMOC as an initiative, and they provide phenomenal guidance as we move forward as an initiative as well. I also want to thank Jamie Brunson and the First Person Arts team. Jamie's in the back. All right, give it up for Jamie, please. Phenomenal team, Jen, Danielle, Tanisha, and Neil. It's been a wonderful partnership working with them. I also want to thank the folks here at Congresso, Clyde, who just spoke, Andrea, Hector, and Julia, who are in the back. Thank you guys for being a part of this. I hope this will be a continuing as well in the future. I also want to thank our phenomenal, working with EMOC and working with this initiative is phenomenal. I work with my colleagues at DBHIDS that include a phenomenal planning team and a committee that I want to just name out. If you guys can just please stand or wave where you are. That's talking about Eddie Collazo, Magdalena Ramos, Anthony McLaughlin, Cam McClinton, Cesar Matia, Edie Lozada. I think that's everybody in the room. Thank you guys for being a part of this. These are really the folks who make this work move week in and week out. They do a phenomenal work guiding this initiative and make sure that we're moving forward. Beyond Expectations began about 3 years ago, and we understood that it's important for us to use storytelling to amplify issues throughout the city of Philadelphia. And we've worked with men of color and men in general to kind of discuss various issues, everything from relationship between fathers and sons, and men from the LGBTQIA community. We talked about immigrant and refugee men of color as well. Even 2 months ago, we focused on women who love men of color. And we had an entire panel full of women telling their story as well. But tonight is very, very important because we understand that the crisis of opioids has really gripped our nation, not only the city, and it's an opportunity to really engage with the folks who can kind of tell their story, right? Provide their own narrative about how they dealt with it, and really in an honest, sincere way, a genuine way that can be frank, that can be candid, that can be open, that can be honest, that can be very transparent. And so I want to thank all of our guys who are speaking tonight, Kenny Campbell, Tyler Hurst, Kelly Knox, Carlos De Jesus, and Ramon Cruz. Can you give it up for our storytellers, guys? They're very brave, and they're going to show what they have tonight. At the close of this event, we're also going to have a survey, which should be in your chairs. The survey will actually allow us to be better informed about the work that we're doing. So please fill it out at the closing, and we'll collect that as well. You'll also get a bag at the end to kind of take home some of these treats around the room. And lastly, also, before we go, our next event is going to be actually next week on the 28th. We're doing an event focusing on recovery and the broad spectrum of recovery, right? We're going to have folks telling their stories of, neighborhood violence, incarceration, intimate partner violence, as well as addiction. And so it's really kind of doing a deeper dive into recovery. That's going to be next Thursday, June 28th at 6:30 p.m. over at ProAct at 17th and Lehigh. For more info, you can go to healthymindsphilly.org. Again, www.healthymindsphilly.org for our calendar and to get more info as well. A quick important note about restrooms. They're in the back hallway and to the immediate left. So again, just walk down the end of this hallway, immediate left, you will see our bathrooms there. Please turn your cell phones on silent if you can. Again, they're going to be giving honest, vulnerable stories. So we don't want a ringer to interrupt them as they're giving their stories. As well, if you do take pictures, keep them to a minimum, and please keep the flashes off, because we don't want the flashes to also shut them in as well while they're up here. Feel free to tweet us your pictures or thoughts or ideas at EMOC Philly. That's EMOC, E-M-O-C, Philly. And thank you very much for being here this evening. To provide some opening commentary even further about this event and why this topic is so important, I want to actually bring up our fearless leader, somebody who's guided all of us and really has a strong commitment to tackling this issue of opioids and ultimately addiction, our Deputy Commissioner, Roland Lamb. Yeah. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening. I can't get away without saying to you, the struggle continues, the victory is certain. It's an exchange that I had to have when I fellowship with other people who are in the room and with people who are in recovery. So if I say to you, the struggle continues, you say to me, the victory is certain. So the struggle continues.
The victory is certain.
The struggle continues.
The victory is certain.
The struggle continues.
The victory is certain.
It's important that we understand the nature of the struggle. We don't have necessarily an opioid problem. We have an addiction problem. We have a problem that we are abusing ourselves and losing ourselves in the drugs, in our drugs of choice. And ultimately, we stop struggling to be who we are, and we start struggling to seem like something else. So our struggle becomes a difference between struggling to seem okay and struggling to be okay. That is why things like tonight, events like tonight, are so important. The idea that someone who is being a part of that experience, someone who has had lived experience, someone who is in long-term recovery, ultimately becomes essential and important. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to go off into a tirade because, you got to remember, I'm from 3 generations of Baptist ministers, so you all can be deep trouble here this evening. But I want to say to you is this: the greatest threat to this epidemic that we're in, and the greatest threat to our country today, is stigma. The names that we call each other, the names that we call ourselves, have reduced us to something other than being human. And we have been okay with that. And so now we live in a country where it's okay to put children in concentration camps. Now we live in a country where it's okay to just lock people up wholesale. Now we live in a country where we are condoning genocide. And it's okay for someone who looks like me, who talks like me, who acts like me, to die. I would hope that we listen very carefully in this fellowship to each other. I beg that we also, take this as a fellowship. And don't leave here and let people walk away. At the end of this, go up to each other and make yourselves known. Develop a relationship. Because now more than ever, we need each other. And I'm hoping that all of us in this room really take to heart the stories that we're about to hear. Because they are important. The people telling these stories are important. And who knows? A story might touch us in the kind of way where it saves our life or it helps us to save a life. Speaking of saving a life, let me ask a question real quick here. Everybody know what this is? Thank you. How many of you all got your own packets? I would hope that everyone in this room has their own packet. That everyone in this room is ready and expects to be able to save a life. That's how dire this is. We could be walking down the street and we can come up upon someone and save their lives. And that's why it's so important to connect with people. Remember, any one of us can become addicted. Any one of us can recover. And maybe some of us can become deputy commissioners. I believe.
Wow, thank you so much. That was really inspirational. So I'm Jamie J. I have the great privilege of working with storytellers and the amazing staff of First Person Arts in partnership with the Department of Behavioral Health. As you can see, our leadership is quite inspiring. Thank you again, sir. So the bottom line is what First Person Arts does is we help people develop their personal stories for the stage, the page, online, and on air. And what we're specifically looking to do is lift up voices that too often go unheard around the pressing issues of our time. So that's why we're here today. I'm not going to stay here long, but I do want to tell you what you can expect. We have some very brave storytellers tonight that have agreed to open up their heart and their life to this audience in hopes of helping other people. I would like to ask the audience, because this is kind of scary, you know, coming up here and opening up your life. Anybody that is so inclined, if you could move a little closer so that the storytellers have some people, you know, a little bit closer, if you feel like it, that would be great. What you're going to hear are the following storytellers, because I'm not going to come back up, so listen to the order you're in. Kenny Campbell will start, then Tyler Hurst, Shelley Knox, and we're going to bring it home with Ramon Cruz. After our last storyteller tells her story, Gabe is going to come back up and transition us, because you will have an opportunity after the storytellers are finished to ask questions, to share your experiences if you'd like, and Chad will be leading us in a talk back. Where are you, Chad? Where are you? Oh, there you are, darling. Okay. So without any further ado, our first storyteller is Kenny Campbell. Thank you.
How you guys doing? Wait, can you hear me? I'm scared to death of this thing, because every time I talk into them, they go all haywire and feedback. We all right, right? Yeah. So I want to thank everybody for having me here today, man. It's a real honor. I'm an addict named Kenny, and it's not an honor, it's actually a blessing to be up here and be able to share my story. Pretty much I'm really nervous, man. I don't ever really share from a standing point in front of a microphone. It's always behind a table in a room full of people that I know. With that being said, let me give you a little background on me. Yeah, I was a drug addict, man. I was fucking hopeless, beat the hell up, beat down, nowhere to go, lost everything I had in my life. And I made it out of it. I'm gonna tell you how. I got, let's start from the beginning here, because I'm a little scattered, you know, a little shot out, you know what I mean? So, right, I came from a great background, great family, man, great family dynamic, you know, my father, my mother, grandparents lived like a block away, all that stuff was great. Awesome childhood. My father was an iron worker, busted his ass to give me everything that he could, and taught me to be the best man that I can be. And when I was about, excuse me, I really don't like talking about this, but I feel like I need to put it out there. When I was 17, man, my father was killed. Someone tried to rob him, shot him in the head. I was actually maybe half a block away from it when it happened. I actually got there, and somebody told me, and I was there before the police were there, before everything was there. And that was a really traumatic moment in my life. You know what I mean? I've lost everything. I was a daddy's boy. I stayed out of trouble. I didn't do none of that. And my father corrected me. You know what I mean? I went home, and if I did something wrong, my mom didn't holler at me. My mom told my dad hollered at me, you know? So when my dad was gone, there was really no one to holler at me. So it was off to the races I went. Not necessarily with drugs, just acting out in different ways, man. Came into some money. And this is when I guess I can reflect back now and realize that I was an addict. I had to have 3 cars. I had to have 2 motorcycles. I had to have 50 pairs of shoes, right? So there was where my addiction really started to take off. You know, it wasn't really a drug addiction then. It was more an addiction to fill a void in myself and try to make myself look better, myself feel better, because I was empty. Fast forward a little bit, had a child at 24 years old, and it was awesome. My life was fabulous. You know, built an apartment. I had an apartment, had a fiance, all that, and she ended up being a drug addict, man. And my son was born a week later. She was back out on the streets, and I had no idea, you know, that she would come home and sleep, and I'd be like, what's going on with her, man? And, you know, it must be postpartum depression, you know, because I was clueless to it. I never put myself really around her. And so I kept trying to save that relationship. And that was the first time in my life that I actually ever really truly changed who I was and who I believed in to try to make something work. And by doing that, I said, you know what? Yeah, you want to do some pills? All right, let's take some pills, you know? And my relationship was fine for a week. And then it was off to races with her again. Now, I was first introduced to opiates when I wrecked a motorcycle, died twice, flatlined, and it was like a little taste. It planted the seed for me, I truly believe, of, you know, that being an out for me. Because when I crashed the motorcycle, it was like nothing else mattered. I took a pain pill, and, you know, I was fine, happy, you know. My leg was in 13 pieces, but it was all good. So when I started taking them again, it was filling that void and that, you know, loss of unhappiness and feeling something less of a man, that I couldn't keep a family together or anything like that. And then she left, and it was just me and my son, man. And I continued to take, you know, to get high. Like, it's not lie. I continued to get high, and that's all that really mattered, man. I lived to use and used to live. Plain and simple. I didn't care. My son would get just a minimal of what he needed. And my sister ended up taking my son, and he was 2 at the time, and I would sleep on her couch because I lost everything I had. And I'm a tattoo artist, so I would work, and I would stay at work to get high and not go home, and I would stay there till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. But I'd always made money, and I was always successful at it. I was very successful at, you know, producing income for a shop. Who the owner of the shop really trusted in me and was never there. Maybe once a month he would pop up. And he was actually a very, very good friend of mine. And he saved my life. He came up to me one day and was like, look, dude, like, I'm enabling you to kill yourself. You know, you're just, you are awesome, you make me a lot of money, but I just can't deal with it no more. Like, you're killing yourself on my dollar, and that's it. So that's when I got introduced to recovery the first time. And I went, I'm not gonna tell you I went, you know, joyous and happy. You know, my original plan of going away was, look, man, I'm gonna go away for like 3 days and come back out and keep using, you know, like charge my batteries up and he'll think everything's okay. And then when I went away, I actually sat there and one of the texts there made me get out of my detox room and go sit in this meeting. And I sat in the meeting and I learned a little bit and I listened and I was like, you know what, all right, you know, things are starting to make a little bit of sense, man. And that's where I heard the words surrender, you know, all your basic stuff, sponsor. I said, what's a sponsor? You know what I mean? Like, just stuff and programs like NA. I never thought anything about that. Dude, that's the fellowship that I chose because I felt like, you know, most comfortable there. Hold on, let me calm down a second. Nervous. Sorry, folks. Yeah, so when I went away, man, they did a lot of stuff for me, man. They really, it opened my eyes. First off, I wasn't a drug addict that went out and hung out with other drug addicts. You know what I mean? I didn't like to share. I'm not a sharer. No, so I would just shit by myself. So I really never experienced anything like going into a room full of fucking people that all wanted the same exact thing, and so much diversity in there, and you know, you would get somebody that would be in there, and I'm like, yeah, that dude ain't gonna talk to me, and it comes right up, yo, what's up, man? What are you doing? You know, like it was a welcoming feeling to have somebody accept me in there, and so that kind of showed me a little bit about fellowshipping, you know, and then I started seeing people that I knew, and I was scared to go into meetings like after I left. But I ended up staying in rehab for 30 days. There I go with that scattered stuff again. I'm always scattered, always bouncing around. You know, you never stay on track, you know? It's like, all right. So I'm sorry if you guys are getting lost, but I'm just a mess, man. You know, this is really nerve-wracking. Yeah, so I So I did stay. I ended up staying in treatment for 32 days, I believe, right? And I couldn't believe I did it. And that's when I got the most. It was insane. I literally remember getting picked up from treatment and my brother going to me, yo, what do you want to do the most? And I said, I want to go home and sleep in my bed. And then like 2 minutes later, I'm like, wait a minute, I don't have a fucking bed. You know what I mean? Like, dude, I'm sleeping on a fucking couch, man. Like, what the hell? You know, and then like, it was the first time I literally seen like actual, like, just the clarity in my mind was so intense and real that it was just beautiful, man. It was like seeing some stuff. I know it sounds really corny, especially coming from me, but like, I could literally walk outside and be like, wow, man, the clouds look really nice today. I've been standing at the same damn clouds for 38 years. You know what I mean? Like, and now all of a sudden they look nice. Like, it's just like the little things, man, that people take for granted every day that like I was just so oblivious to, man. Like, the impact that I make on like just people on a daily, like, and don't even know it as being, of course not when I was using, but now, like, so, all right, let's go that point. Let me back it up a little bit. So, after my first time away, right, I did good, man. I had a sponsor, I got a home group, did all that stuff, right, and I got, like, I made it up to, like, 4 years clean, making an honest, solid, working a program, but doing very minimal. You know what I mean? Like, all right, I don't really feel like looking at myself today, so I'm not going to do no step work. You know what I mean? And it would get to the point where my sponsor would be like, dude, like, you know, like, you got to do something, bro. I want it by this day. And then I would rush and do my step work, not thorough, nothing like that, you know. And then I met my fiance, my wife now, actually. God, that gosh, here. And I started, you know, life was looking good, man. It was feeling full again and feeling great. And yeah, so like planning a wedding, spent $30,000 like planning this damn wedding, and she was like getting high the whole time. You know what I mean? And I'm like, what the hell? Like, and I didn't know it because I'm the stupidest drug addict alive. Like, I'm like, how the hell do I not know she? You know what I mean? Like, what the hell? And so then, of course, you know, I do what I'm supposed to do. I call my sponsor, yo, man, she's getting high, dude. He's like, yeah, well, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you're an asshole. So I stopped talking to him, right? I'm like, I'm not talking to him no more. And I go to a meeting, share about it, and somebody calls me, she calls me, and she's like, why are you sharing about me at a meeting? And I'm like, yo, like, chill, you know? And then that broke my distrust for the whole, like, meeting thing. Well, guess what? You stop going to meetings, you stop showing up, you stop doing stuff. You know what I mean? Eventually you let a little door open up for your addiction to creep in, right? And she calls me and she's like, listen, we need to meet up. And she gets honest with me and tells me, you know, I'm like, all right, and what do I do? And I'm like, all right, well, you know, she's like, you're never gonna let me live this down. And I'm like, all right, well, here, I'll do one, right? The greatest idea in the world. I'll do one so that, you know, I can't judge you, you can't judge me. Yeah, that lasted a whole year. So I continued, and let me tell you something, when they say that, you know, your drug picks up right where it left off, fucking right it did, man. That thing came back like a beast that had been caged up for 5 years, and it was living hell, like legitimate hell for me, man. I went right back to losing everything again, lost all that money for the wedding, because we called the wedding off, lost everything. Legitimately everything, and my main goal was I'm going to take care of her. I'm going to focus and get her to go to treatment and everything will be fine. And of course, you know, me being the addict that I am, I'm like, yeah, I can take care of her. Yeah, so I'm chasing her around and not worrying about myself, killing myself, running myself into the ground, looking like a fool, you know. Got to the point where I said, you know what, we got in a fight one night, and it was like crazy tit for tat stuff, man. Like, she sent me this like stupid picture, and at this point, my kid, who's now 13, called his mother, who's never in his life, it like shows up once every 6 months, maybe, and was like, Dad's off the chain and come get me. Like, and I'm thinking deep down inside, like, yeah, we just moved So he's down there playing with his friends where his mom lives. Motherfucker ain't got no friends down there, you know what I mean? He just didn't want to be around me. I was a hot mess that didn't give a shit about no one, anything else, or anybody but myself, right? So he's at his mom's, she's messing with me, and I'm just at wit's end, man. I cannot put the drug down, I cannot do anything, I can't do nothing at all but get high. I could not leave my house, I could not stop, and I'm like crying out for attention, and I ended up in my bedroom with a gun to my head, like I'm just gonna fucking kill myself. And for some reason, I got a little piece of, it was like everything I learned that 5 years before I relapsed about myself, and everything that I did for myself, I disqualified, you know? I just said, I don't know nothing, it didn't work the first time. But I still had seeds that were planted from my recovery, and it was like, I was like, I know the answer, you know? I really do, I know the answer to this. And so I shot a hole in my wall and ran out of my bedroom, because that's the only way I could leave the house. I was petrified. I was like, I'm going to jail. And it was funny too, because I ran right down the street into a cop. I was like, hi officer, mangled, right? And he's like, are they playing with fireworks up there? I'm like, uh-huh. He's like, have a good day. And I was like, all right, cool. You know, next day, rehab I went, man. And it was the hardest, it was horrible. It was the hardest, jarring, most breaking experience I've ever had in my life. The fact that the first time I went away, my son was so young that he really didn't notice, he just knew Daddy was going to get better. This time I had to physically sit there, face him, say, Bob, I'm sorry, dude. This is what I'm doing, and this is where I gotta go. And he said, thank God. And you know what I mean? And I'm like, all right. So I went away. My boss was on board with me. He's like, all right, dude, well, do what you gotta do. And I'm like, okay. That was it. And, you know, the whole time I'm running around getting high, like, I can't let them know because they'll fire me, you know. And all I had to really do was just go to somebody, reach out a little bit, and say, yo, I need some help, you know. And I didn't do it. So I went away. Now, the family don't have much money. I just moved into a house, got bills, and my kid's about to start school. I'm like, all right, I can stay 2 weeks, you know? Like, so I had to stay for 2 weeks, right? And I stayed, and then I left, and it was not a good idea. It was the hardest thing I've ever did in my life. When you leave and you go into a fellowship like I do, usually you leave rehab in 30 days and you walk in there and you get a key tag and you feel like you accomplished something. I left with, like, I gotta wrap it up? Oh, wow, I didn't even get half my story out yet. Damn! Did I really beat the timer for once? Oh, schmoly! That's awesome. Yo, listen. So, back to what I was saying is, I'm 9 months clean today, thank God. Possible, you know, and I hope I did what I was supposed to do tonight because I just can't believe I talked that long. You know? I just spoke at a meeting the other night and I got so nervous. I was like, oh, I'm done. I'm not gonna get any thanks. And everyone was like, really, bro? It was like 3 minutes. You know? But I want to thank you, sir, for everything you're doing, and it's a wonderful pleasure to be here, and everyone else too. And thank you very much, guys. And that's all I got.
Hopefully I don't trip over this cord, but if you guys don't mind, I'd like to move around a little bit.
All right.
So I'll be straight honest with you guys. In a lot of the work that I do, I actually give trainings on recovery messaging, recovery dialects, but tonight I'm going to do things a little bit differently. Tonight I'm going to take the kid gloves off and I'm going to give you guys like the raw, uncut version. I'm going to say some words that I train people to know are stigmatizing, and it's my attempt to be as human as possible with you. So, without further ado, like all these stories mostly do, I'm going to start at rock bottom. I woke up in an abandoned field on a snowy January morning with my hands purple from exposure and a needle in my arm. And it was the needle that was supposed to kill me. It was the needle that I wanted to kill me. So, in this moment, waking up, not having wanted to wake up, I realized that I lost such control of my life that I couldn't even end my life on my own terms while very actively trying to. In that needle was a dose of opioids large enough to kill a very large animal, and it was my full intent to take my own life that night. Drug addiction is one of the most dark and alone places that a human being can be. When we see people who are roaming around the streets, some of them may look like they're in a hurry, but they're probably at some of the most lonely and alone parts of their life that they're going through. They can be surrounded by people, they can be in the most crowded places that they've ever been, but feel completely and utterly alone. So it was in that moment that I decided that I was going to try and get help, which was something that I had never done. And so I turned it over. And when I say I turned it over, I don't know exactly what it was that I turned it over to. It wasn't God, it wasn't myself, and it wasn't anything that I'd really previously stood for. To this day, I couldn't tell you what it was. And so I walked to a hospital in West Philly, and the crisis workers at the hospital probably thought I was a junkie. The rest of society surely did, and some people still do. And in that moment, when you tell people the deepest, darkest secrets and recesses of your soul to try to get yourself access to treatment, and you strip away all your dignity to do so, right after that, they take your belt and your shoelaces and any cords that you have and strip that away from you too. And they left me sitting in a kind of like a holding cell area, where the next morning I was lucky enough, and I don't know if it was because of my white skin or because I was a college kid or because I had insurance, that I was able to get into treatment. And I was lucky enough to make it out. I made it out of treatment. And after making it out, there was one thing that didn't change about being in recovery from being in addiction, and that's that my friends didn't stop dying. So I started to do something about it. I found a group of people who I'm now blessed enough to call my friends that found this theory that says that if you have an open conversation with people and you show them your humanity and you allow them to know who you are on a personal level, that is what shows them that you're just human too. And I'm really thankful to be here today because I feel like that's the effort behind what we're doing right now. But we found that people were receptive as well. And so myself and a group of large advocates across the country got together and put a messaging training together. And we went out and we talked to people. We started telling the story of the power of recovery. And unfortunately, people kept dying. And after doing this for a while, I've spoken to a number of high schools across the greater Philadelphia area and just different conversations and places. And started to notice a trend. It was when we were invited to a place to speak, somebody had just recently died. And every time, the community was up in arms because somebody had passed away. Somebody had been lost to this illness. And I started asking myself, why do we always wait until someone dies? But I got back into school and finally finished my bachelor's degree, and then I went on to get my master's. And it was when I was in my master's program that I noticed an even bigger trend. It was the trend that all the other activist movements across the United States had this same occurrence happening. That somebody or a large amount of people have to die for people to start caring. The Black Lives Matter movement and the student survivors of gun violence are probably some of the best examples of this. And I gotta be honest, man. Now I'm asking myself, how many people have to die? How many people have to die for us to start caring and treating each other like human beings? I'm blessed in that I'm going to be a father soon. And I'm excited, but I'm terrified. And not just because I'm going to be a father, but because I'm bringing my kid into a world where, well, let me just say, have any of you ever read the comments section of the Philly.com article on safe injection facilities? Because they call us addicts, they call us junkies, and they say, just let them die. And that says to me, you're letting me die. Every one of the people who's in this city, who's in this area, who's struggling, every one of the people who you see under the bridge, every one of the people who's in the encampments, I am them. These people are saying, you can just die. And I'm bringing my son into this world? It's terrifying. Terrifying. But there's hope. And that hope is in every single one of us. Because all of us, we have a power that is greater than guns or drugs and hate and violence. That power is our voice. And what we're doing here today, and what we need to be doing, like Roland said, is taking this message and talking to our friends and our families and our loved ones, because it's our conjoined voices that are going to stop the societal constructs like racism and addiction and classism in this country. We can continue talking about these things, but it's not until we come together as a force of people to overcome them. And that's the kind of world that I want to bring my child into. My name is Tyler Hurst, and I'm not just a person in long-term recovery. I'm not the amount of years that I have clean. I'm not the jobs that I've had or the degrees that I hold. I'm a human being. And just like every other person here, every person in this neighborhood, every person across the city and across this country and across the world who's currently using drugs and currently struggling, they're humans too. And we need to treat them as such. None of them want to be going through what they're going through. Enduring drug addiction is like mind control. Hearing Kenny talk about how he didn't want to be doing the things he was doing, but that was what he did. I know and I understand that fully, bro. It's like losing control of your everyday life and all your schedule and your things that you do in your job, and only being able to think about one thing, and one thing only. It's only something you can understand if you've been through it, and that's why there's fellowship and communities for people like us. I just hope that all of us today can take this message and give it to our friends and our family and our children and our children's children. And maybe someday, when they're treating people like human beings across this planet, then we'll have overcome these societal problems that we have. And this will be the societal evolution that we all need to work towards. Our next evolution isn't a physical evolution. It's a psychological and societal evolution of people treating people like human beings. That's all I have to say.
First, I want to thank God for life. I want to thank Narcotics Now for keeping my lid at life. For that, I'm truly grateful. You know, I want to thank people that shared before me. I want to thank the person that asked me to come here tonight. You know, I don't normally like wear a suit because this is not my style. But, I ain't had enough sleeves. I had to put this on. So anyway, I'll share a little like how it was for me, like where I'm at today. You know, I started this journey when I was like, I was a kid. My brother left me when I was 4 years old. It devastated my life. You know, and back then I was going to Catholic school. I didn't care too much about Catholic school after that situation. You know, I didn't care nothing about anything. You know, I started acting out like in school. I'm in Catholic school. I started acting out like in school. You know, doing things that I didn't normally like to do. So eventually, right, I started getting high. Because that was the way for me to hide. See, I didn't have more courage or the ability to tell my parents what my brother did to me. So I went on through life like that way. You know, I remember like when I first started using when I was like 17, smoking weed, dust. All that was good to me. I had an opportunity to hide. You know, I remember like stealing my stuff out my people's house and selling it, right? And like, that was all right. I didn't care about none of that. I didn't care how they felt. Only thing I cared about like getting high. That's the most important thing for me. You know, I went to jail when I was 18. I got out when I was 22. I came home with my parents. I started the same cycle all over. But this time I sold product. You know, people know what product is. It's like drugs. Keep it real simple. You know, I sold product. I made a couple of dollars. I couldn't take it home. I'm gonna get that blood money out of here. You don't want that. I said, okay, no problem. So eventually I got kicked out. They ain't had nowhere to go. I lived downtown in Center City. Bumming change. Eat out the dumpsters. And lived in abandoned buildings, right? At the end of my road, I said, God help me. That was August 18th of 1993. I came to a place known as Narcotics Now. I made a lot of Narcotics Now meetings. I met people in the journey who thought they had one more run. They was wrong, they are dead, and they ain't coming back. So when I get in touch with Narcotics Now, Get Off Your Ass program, you gotta do the work. If you don't do the work, you will not stay clean. I seen a lot of people out there wandering the streets. I was one of them. I see them today, they messed up. I still hustle. Because I believe there's hope for everybody. Regardless of what color they are, man. You know, a lot of days, man, like when I'm in the Narcotics Now meetings, I get pumped up in here. You know, I get pumped up. I never had it so good, man. My parents no longer here. My mom died, my dad died June 8th, 1999. He's a great Philadelphia artist. I made a Narcotics Now meeting. I didn't use drugs. I stayed the course. I extend my hand to the newcomer. When anybody need help, I'm available, I'm gonna help. I learned how to talk in Narcotics Now. Not alone anymore, like locked it open in fear and saying the stuff about what I was scared on group level about fear, like how people will look at me. I don't live with people, man. I live with carry up the hope and the promise of freedom. It's just a promise. But you gotta do the work, you gotta do the work right here on the stage here, man. You know how it feels to wake up in the morning about the session and it's supposed to use drugs no more? You said I'm grateful at it, but never use, man. Never. Today, I go to school at 62.
All right.
I want to get a GED. want to go to college today.
Yes, you will.
I go to narcotics meeting every day.
Take your time.
And I live in Brooklyn narcotics out the best of my building. I don't care what you say about me. I don't live for you. At the end of my road, I say, God help me. August 18th, that be 25 years ago. Think about the best of hope and the promise. It's just a promise of freedom, man. But you gotta do work. It's 12 steps, 12 concepts, 12 conditions. This is a data time process. People say, what they can't do, you can't do it because you don't want to do it. That's why you can't do it. You gotta do the work. God I serve is awesome. I don't eat out the dumpster today. I eat from the table. I'm grateful. I told God, look, I don't need a whole lot to live with. Just let me live a little bit above the water and pay my bills and to help the sick and suffering addict to get another day. That's what I live for. I don't co-sign shit and I don't sugarcoat it. I keep it like it is. You either want to live or you're going to die. Real simple. There's no more in between. Either you want to recover or you ask for to die. You do what we do and you stay here. People talking about what they can't do. You can't do it, you don't want to damn do it. Shit. I get it. So how hard can that be, man? Newcomer come in the room one day clean. My job is giving them hope. I don't have no problem seeing the fact that my brother left to me. I'm gonna say, I'm afraid to say that for. What? What you gonna say about me? Who gives a rat's ass? Just maybe one day you'll learn how to talk about the goddamn self. Keep that shit real simple. Call your sponsor, better than get my fucking smoke out. Real simple. Because everybody don't live for a narcotic now. Don't get it twisted. Everybody not in for the same reason why you in here. But just for this day, man, look. My life has changed beyond my wildest beliefs. I still make beats 25 years later. Come on, man. 25 years later. I ain't gotta go. I wanna go. Whoever took my ass to come and share, I go all over the world and share. I don't have a problem talking. I learned how to talk in my economics. I'm not in fear no more. I don't fear no man. I ask God in the morning, and I thank Him at night. I don't question how it works, it just does.
That's right.
Why ain't no God need to crazy. I don't want you to smoke me to stop. So look, man, look. This is the best I've lived in all my life. I washed my ass today. I didn't do that when I was getting high. Getting high was more important. You know, I washed my underwear today. They clean today. Yeah. I wash my ass, I take baths, man. You know, I learned how to do all these things in Narcotics Anonymous. Narcotics Anonymous International. I can go to China saying I'm an addict, I can get a hug. If I go to the crack house, they want how much money you got? A couple dollars? No, I ain't got a couple dollars, man. I don't want to go back. I want to go forward.
Yeah.
So the people that the rules of Narcotics Anonymous, they just like me. All the slimy with dog ass shit I did in my addiction and in my recovery, they did it too. They enabled me to say what I needed to say at Narcotics Anonymous. I keep it real simple. Don't you talk about shut up. Shut up. You don't know nothing. That's your damn problem. Shut up. Learn to listen, listen, learn. You come in the door running your mouth. How can I tell you something you run in your mouth? I can't tell you nothing. So the reality is, once again, you got to want this, man. You got to surrender in order to win. If you don't surrender, you're gonna die. Point blank. I ain't never walked down the street and the drug jumped out of the drug boy pocket in mine and I gave him the money. So if I can ask somebody, can you help me to kill myself? So why is it hard for me to come here to ask my life? Like, can you help me save my life, man? Why is that so hard, man? The God I serve, man, look, y'all ain't got nothing on Jesus. I don't care what you say. Because the reality is, man, look, I'm grateful, man. see people out there struggling. I don't mind talking to them. I'm not afraid to come down here and talk to people. I just walk in the same street that killed me. I just, when I was using days, I just walk the same street. Oh man, you're scared when I ain't sure. I ain't scared. Scared of what? So look, man, it's real simple. My life, you have my wildest dreams. I still make narcotics on me today. I still help people. I still tell people to shut the hell up. That's what you're talking about. I still do that. Real shit, man. Look. The first thing something is real simple. I can't. God can. I need a letter. Because without God, ain't none of this stuff gonna be possible. None of it. I understand people suffering out there in the world. Yeah, I understand that. But there's a God. Maybe you call him sometime. Because he does answer prayers. Because if there ain't no prayer, I wouldn't be here. Thanks for allowing me to speak.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Some great stories, man, and I have to follow them. Wow, it's a tough job. Thanks for sharing your stories, man. It hits deep. It's, you know, it really brought back a lot of pain, hurt, but also it brought back, you know, where I'm at today and where the struggle started. You know, and as Roland says, you know, the struggle continues. And yes, victory is certain. And I stand here in front of you. I was born and raised right in this neighborhood. Sold drugs right down the street, Hancock and Camry, for many, many years. But that was a choice I made because growing up, I had a great childhood. I had a mother and father that gave me everything I needed, and I was adopted at 5 months. I guess, you know, my mom and dad, my biological parents, chose not to have me around. And I was adopted by my godparents, which was the biggest blessing I could ever have. Growing up, they gave me everything. I was spoiled, went to Catholic school. From kindergarten to 12th grade, I went to St. Peter's Apostle, 5th and Girard. Went to high school at Roman Catholic. Great education. But growing up, I was, like I said, I was spoiled. So I was bullied a lot, teased a lot. And that made me go and gravitate towards the guys in the neighborhood. They were selling drugs, nice cars, dressed nice. So I said, wow, they get all the respect from the neighborhood. Didn't know that what it was is that the neighborhood feared them. So I wanted that. So I gravitated towards that and I started selling drugs. And that was the start of my addiction because I was addicted to that lifestyle. That lifestyle was good for me. That's just what I wanted. And that's where my addictive behavior started. But it also started a period of in and out of incarceration for the next 25 to 30 years. I would go into jail, come out, do the same thing, never change anything, never change my behaviors. And then during one of my incarcerations, as I told you, my father, he was the world to me. He was my hero, he was my coach, he supplied everything I needed. Nothing, my dad could do nothing wrong. My mom would talk about my dad, and I didn't want to hear it. you know? And my dad would spend weekends away and came home, dropped a check on Friday, and showed up on Sunday. And my mom would fight with him, and I'd protect my dad. So during one of my incarcerations, my father passed away. And it was maybe one of the biggest blows of my life, because I wasn't able to come out of jail and say goodbye. I was stuck in jail. He was at the funeral, he was buried. That was 21 years ago, and today I still have not been to his gravesite. I could talk about him today. I used to just break down. And I went into a state of depression, resentment, guilt, anger. I was mad at my dad. But I also was depressed. And that took me into a tailspin in prison, and I started using opiates in prison. Started using heroin right in prison. It was easy to find, easy to do, you know, and I continued to do that. I came home and continued. Came on the street, and since I was always in the streets, I could always get the drug. It continued, and spiraled in and out of jail, in and out of jail. I never tried to get clean. I just didn't want to. Because I didn't want to deal with the pain that I had with my father's death. It gave me so much. He gave me so much, and I just missed him so much. I just didn't want to deal with it. And I was taking my family through pain. And listen, and I had kids, and I wasn't in their life. That wasn't what my dad taught me. But the addiction took me there. I just didn't care about anything. Didn't even care about myself. So it wasn't until I got locked up again at a higher level, and I said I needed to change my life. Something just told me, listen, you're getting older, man. You can't run out here with these young guys. You just can't no more. So in jail, I went to see somebody to deal with mental health. Somebody said I had a mental health disease. I said, that's crazy. Because in my culture, we didn't speak about that. Mental health, that's crazy. No, I'm not crazy. I just like to get high. But when I look back, I went back to myself and said, wait a minute. Something's got to be going on. So I went and I started seeing somebody. And I never forget my first session with the person. I start crying over. I said, I can't be like this. I was in disarray. She said, that's okay. She said, you got a lot of anger. I said, huh? Yeah, you got a lot of anger. And I said, okay. So we started working on some things. And I started to notice that my addiction had a core. And that was depression, anger. And then until I started dealing with that, and it was so hard to deal with because I cried every session. But then I would clean up and go back to my cell and, act like, because I didn't want nobody in jail seeing me cry. So I started dealing with things, and I started reading books. And she used to give me these words, and I said to myself, man, I started feeling better about myself. And I said, man. So I continued the treatment and everything. And I just didn't want to use no more. I just wanted to work more. I started feeling better about myself. And it was time to come home, and I was like, okay, what am I going to do with myself? Usually, I come home and I lean on somebody. Either my baby's mom, my sister. I would go to their house and lean on them. And not have to pay bills, and not have to do nothing. And the choice that I made this time was, I'm going to a recovery house. I'm going to do this on my own. So I went into a recovery house. And in that recovery house, there was a lot of structure. You know? And I didn't have a problem with authority. 'Cause I was in and out of jail, so I learned how to just deal with authority. So the person that owned this recovery house seen something in me, man. And at first, I thought he was blowing smoke in my eyes. I ain't gonna lie to you. I really did. Hey, man, I see something in you. I said, yeah, all right. So he gave me the opportunity to work there, be a resident nighttime manager. And he told me, you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to do that. I said, oh, that goes against all my morals. I'm not telling nobody. That's not what I do. So I had to change my way of thinking. Because again, I was addicted to that lifestyle. No, you don't snitch, you don't tell, you don't do none of that. So I started noticing and I started changing not changing my morals and values, but going back to my morals and values that my mother and my father instilled in me when I was young. I just threw them away. I never stood on them. So I started dealing with that. And it was there that I said, yeah, I got to make something of myself in my life. I was 47 years old. I haven't popped the piss in or a window to throw it out. But yet I wanted something in life. So it wasn't until he asked me to be the night manager, then he asked me to be an office clerk. I started messing with computers. I said, wow. He started teaching me. And then one day I asked him, I said, yo man, why aren't you helping me? What do you want out of it? And he said, listen man, I told you, when I first seen you, there was something about you. And I was saying to myself, maybe he ain't no smoking. Maybe he does believe in me. But nobody believed in me, but my mother did. My mother always told me, one day, I know before I die, I'll see you working somewhere in a suit and tie. Wow. And I said to her, I wore a suit and tie all through school. I don't want to wear no more suit and tie. You know what I mean? I was done with that. So, my mom kept on telling me that. So, and then the thing about it is, so at this recovery house, they taught me a lot of things. And he offered me a chance to become a certified peer specialist. And he said, if they don't pay for it, I'll pay for it for you. And I said, here we go, there goes the catch. I gotta owe this guy some money. So I did, and I got a scholarship through DBHIDS. And I became a certified peer specialist. And that changed my whole life. I got offered many job opportunities, and I took the job opportunity that I thought was the best. And I thank God I did. It was working at community behavioral health. It was there that I grew, and they used my strengths, and I really listened. I asked a lot of questions. And I took every opportunity that they gave me. It was later then that I met someone in the system, and he offered me a position to be his assistant. And that was a big move. I clashed with him all the time. We bumped heads. But in bumping heads with him, I learned. And he gave me the opportunity to grow. I had a chance to be on TV, tell my story, and I said, man, I'm getting paid to tell my story. This is crazy. And I started wearing a suit and tie. and I liked wearing a suit and tie, so I started buying more suits. So in saying that, you know, I work for DBHIDS. Today I'm a father. Yes. Today I'm a son. I'm a brother. Today my son turned 30 years old. Yes. And I was able to talk to him today. And when I talk to him, he's struggling, but I'm here for him. And he knows he can pick up the phone any day and say, Dad, I'm struggling. And I can say, it's okay. It's okay. I'm here. So all I keep on telling you is what Roland said. The struggle continues, but victory is certain.
That's right.
Thank you.
Give it up again for our storytellers, please, if you can. Ramon, Kelly, Tyler. These were some powerful stories, and I think that they allowed us to internalize just the story, the navigation of these challenges in our community, but ultimately that there is hope. I'm going to ask some of my EMOC team, if you can, help me out to bring some of these chairs out front. We're going to transition into our talk back. My chairs are right up here to my right, your left, so if you can have a couple folks do that. As we're doing this, with the survey that should be on your seat, if you can maybe perhaps begin to get that completed. There should be one hopefully right next to you as we're transitioning. We'll make sure that we get that to you. If you need a pen, we also have pens next to you as well. Or at the back table, we'll get those pens to you, some pencils to you as well. But I really want us to begin to understand that this is also a moment for you. So if you have any thoughts or questions or concerns or ideas, now would be a great time to begin to think about questions that you want to ask any of our men today, and think about how you can be supportive of this movement for change and how we're going to continue to combat addiction here in the city of Philadelphia. And so again, we're going to take a few moments for that. And then what I want to do is actually I want to bring up our men, if you can, to just come up front. Also, I want to actually highlight our director again for today's production, Mike Durkin. Give it up for Mike Durkin, please. He's really worked hand in hand to make this show happen and to make sure that we can have all that we need for today's event. And we definitely thank Mike for being a part of this. I think it's important to kind of also acknowledge I want to also give shout out to Melissa Dunphy. She's in the back, she's providing for us on the viola. She's amazing. Yes. Give it up for Melissa Dunphy. Being part of this as well. All right. And thanks again I want to thank again Jamie Brunson, I want to thank Ian Zada, and I want to thank Roland Lamb, just for these words that really have inspired us all to kind of keep moving forward. And Roland, if you don't mind, do you want to sit up that panel today? You might join our panel? Yes. Might be helpful for us. I think it might be good for Roland to kind of hear more about these stories and for us all to kind of hear these stories. I think that would be super helpful. I think we have another microphone, is that correct? We have one there? Okay, thank you. Maybe we can actually give it to the gentleman, actually, it might be helpful. So we can pass it down. And we'll figure that out how we want to get this over. So I'm actually going to get a seat, so I don't need to really sit down. So my first question really is, and this is, again, opportunity to really engage a little more deeply, for all the men, and anybody can kind of jump in on this question, but what or who have been your main support systems in your journey towards recovery? Obviously, it might be different for all of y'all individually, right? All of you have expressed some very powerful stories. So what or who have been your main support systems in your lives?
God and Narcotics Anonymous.
Okay.
I would say definitely Narcotics Anonymous, my higher power, and just everybody, I've met in my circle of friends and, other fellow recovering addicts.
For me, a lot of it was the advocates that I've done a lot of work with, advocacy, and my family, like recreating the connections with my family members has been something that I try to do continually, but has been a very big part of my recovery process and has instilled my support system.
With me is my spiritual foundation, but also I have surrounded myself with what I call my advisory board, people with long-term recovery that are still active, and I always say to myself, I'd rather have 4 quarters than 100 pennies. And I say that because the only people that I bring around me is somebody that could bring something to the table. If you have nothing positive to bring to the table and help me, then, you know, I just don't need you around.
I think for me, it's been primarily, family, friends, and this may sound very strange, but me. I think that there's a couple of things that I need to just share. One, it has been the willingness to acknowledge and forgive myself. Number 2 is to stay humble. People who know me will always know that when they ask me how you doing, I always say I'm struggling as always. And the reality is, for me, every day is a struggle. And the struggle is, I know the difference between seeming okay and being okay. And I know what it's like when I try to slip into seeming okay. And I know that the longer I stay in that zone of seeming okay, I'm not going to be okay. So the reality for me is that every day I have to keep myself into being okay.
Great stuff. One of the things I wanted to ask is that several of you guys talked about stigma, and the stigma that might come with addiction or with having a mental health challenge or what have you. What did you learn yourself about stigma and how stigma really what may have been a barrier to you receiving help? How did stigma and the stigma that it plays as far as trying to get help, being quote unquote crazy, being quote unquote, as somebody said a junkie, right, in these comments, Philly.com. How did you work through those stigmas personally?
I'll start because I got the microphone. The first level of stigma that you got to work with, I had to work myself through, was the idea that to know yourself is to love yourself. And as a black male, and I got to come from that, I have to really begin to reflect on the fact that a lot of what I did was about running from me. And a lot of what I did was about taking on images that weren't mine. So for me, the idea of stigma is something that is serial. That you got to always find the positive in yourself, and you got to always connect with it. Otherwise, it's before you lose yourself.
I primarily work in the Kensington neighborhood, encountering folks that have relationships to substance abuse, addiction, and homelessness on a day-to-day basis. And I see stigma in 2 forms. I see stigma in a neighborhood that becomes contagious. It spreads via misinformation or via other sort of channels in which it spreads all over, and it sort of are these barriers that prevent people from actually engaging in dialogue and conversation. But I also see it within the Kensington neighborhood itself, with those that have relationship to substance that feels like, oh, this is the path that I'm supposed to be on because everyone around me is on this path and journey, and I can't get off of it because everyone around me is influencing me to make that decision on myself.
As part of stigma, yeah, and I fight every day to put a face on recovery. Plus also just instill hope. And one of the things when I tell people, they ask me where I live, I say Kensington, they go, ooh. This is home for me. This is my home. And I love my community. And the stigma and the cloud that's over Kensington right now, it's not good, but guess what? There's good things that come out of Kensington. People say that's the Badlands. I say it's the good lands. And that's one of the stigmas that we work on. It's not the Badlands, it's the good lands. And there is hope here. There is hope. And I know because I'm one of them. And I continue to put a face on that and try to break the stigma that's in this area. And as for, trying to get treatment, I always had that problem because, they always say that Puerto Rican guys are drug dealers, and I have always had that stigma, but in getting help, I was able to get help, and a lot of people are not able to.
So as a person who knows and understands white power and privilege, I want to empathize with everybody. And I came from a place of thinking that I knew and understood what stigma was, but I think for me, it wasn't until I was incarcerated for the first time and labeled as a convicted felon or denied access to housing and really treated differently and looked at as I was innately bad. I think one of the first times, not the first times, but the moment for me that taught me what stigma was this happened to me while I was in recovery, actually, after I had not used for over a year. My grandmother, I was coming back home from Wisconsin. My grandmother had told me that she didn't want me to stay at her house because I was in recovery from substance use disorder. And it wasn't until then that I had a better understanding. I don't think I'll ever know what it's like to be a person of color and understand stigma and how it affects people on that level. But today, Roland and Moan, we've been doing events like this across the city for a long time, and it's the same problem. It's the people that aren't in the room that are the problem. It's the people that aren't here, and that's why I was trying, at the end of my speech, I was trying to tell people, like, we have to go home and talk to everybody that we can, because it's us and our voices that are going to combat this stigma. But at the same time, like, I've got white guilt because I'm up here saying the last person, or the last thing that a person of color needs is another white man telling them what to do. And I'm not trying to do that. But I'm happy that I understand these things today, and I'm happy for what I've been through so that I can at least try to understand what it feels like better. I don't know if that answers your question, but it's a compliment.
So, stigma would be, I didn't really struggle with it too much because I get judged on like a daily basis if you look like me. You know what I mean? All the way from the doctor's office or getting pulled over, man. As soon as I went away, it was like, are you running from any warrants? Are you know, and I'm like, no. And they're like, are you sure? I got pulled over one time and the cop was like, is this you? Because I didn't have a beard in it, and I'm like, yeah, that's me. And he's like, what's your inmate number? And I'm like, dude, I've never been in jail, bro. Never got locked up. I don't know how, but yeah, so like, it really doesn't affect me. I am who I am, man. Either you fucks with me or you don't. Like, that I am who I am. I can help you, and that's it. So I really don't let that bother me too much. But I do see how it does affect certain people. I've had multiple people come up to me at meetings that I've seen for years and wouldn't even speak to me, and then they'll hear me share at a meeting or something and be like, dude, I thought you were the biggest asshole ever, man, and like, you're a pretty cool dude. And then also, like, addict-wise, man, I got stigmatized online not that long ago, and it was hilarious because the dude got like bashed by like all these other people. It was like, someone called me a junkie, man, and it was like, don't go get a tattoo from him, and the dude's like, everybody just like, it was pretty cool. Everyone came to my defense, I was like, right on. So, at first I'm like, oh man, this is horrible. How can you do that to me, And, but yeah, so. I guess that's my answer to that one. Hey, Michelle. Talking to Mike, bro.
I really don't care too bad. That's what people think about me. I mean, I'll be honest, In the beginning, I got caught up in all that, but I ain't there today. You know, I turn it over to that to God, I'm gonna ruin my life. I don't have time to think about what people think about me, how they wanna leave me. I don't have time to think about none of that. I got more things to be doing. You know, I realize people have the right to say what they want to say. That's their right. I'll be down the ground because that's their right. No, I'm not doing none of that. I gotta walk away to that. You know, I won't get caught up with that. People got me over the years said a lot of things to me that I didn't take a bike, and I wanted to take them to a place, but I can't go to the leaders. I don't want to go to prison. I had to keep my life and my recovery simple. People want to talk about me to the day I die. Why am I worried about that? That's all I got.
Very good, very good, very good. You know, one of the things, you keep the mic, Tyler, that's cool. And then actually, after this question, I actually want to get to the community, so if anybody has any thoughts or questions or comments, please feel free to, raise your hand and we'll get the questions out to our panelists as well. But my last question really is, we've talked a little bit about your support systems, but I think it's also important to talk about just how you personally coped, right? And so when you think about when you face challenges of memories or stress or depression or even like peer pressure, we know about NA, we know about spiritual foundations, but also what did you do specifically, right? Like were there anything that you did, for some folks they run, for some folks they cook, for some folks they do music, for some folks they work out, for some folks they go for a walk, some folks pray. I just want to hear more for the community here about maybe some of these other coping mechanisms that you personally have to do, because as Roland said, yourself is also part of that. So if anybody wants to talk to that.
Coping for me is major, man. I relieve that whole, if I find a place of serenity for myself, it helps me cope a lot, man. A big part of that was, first off, identifying, why I use drugs. You know what I mean? It's not the drugs that I use, it was the reason why I was using them to get out of myself. And once I found that out and treated that problem, it's pretty funny, like he said. I feel like he finished the last half of my story, and I really do. It was crazy. It's kind of like it happens a lot. You know what I mean? It makes your hair stand up because it just lets you know you're not alone, man. And that in itself it helps you cope a lot. But I find it in my work as well. That's my happy place, man. I go to work and I get to sit there, and I was talking to somebody before this outside about it. I found my way into this business when I was a kid. I never even drew. I failed art class through high school and all that stuff. And my father passed away. It was part of coping. I got tattooed for him, and I was like, yo, I did not worry about a thing, And then that resulted into eventually me tattooing, and it was the same thing for me again. So just through that and a little bit of prayer and meditation sometimes, man, I can pretty much get through like anything, you know what I mean? I've lost relatives through this process, and as long as I stay on my top of my game, and stay aware and do what I do, I'm good.
That's another way I cope too.
I just do hardcore stuff I do the day at a time. I face everything and I recover. No matter what the circumstance is, I face it. If I'm going through something, I'll have numbers. I can pick the phone, I can talk to other people. I'm not afraid to talk to people. To share with them like where I'm at, like what I'm going through. And listen for the answer. I try to keep my life real simple. I really don't get caught up in a whole lot of stuff. I need to speak out, speak. I don't let too much stuff bother me. Because again, once I turn it over, give it to God, God got it now. He don't need my help. So why am I worried about anything?
All right. You got the mic over, bro.
So the question again is, how do you cope with these
Thank you.
on your journey?
So, I'm a person who is very strange in that I love change. I don't really know anybody else who loves change. My wife hates change. It annoys her to death, but I love it. And I'm saying all this to say, my coping mechanisms have changed throughout the years. When I started out, I had a mental activity that I did. And if I found myself having a craving, I would literally imagine neurons in my brain moving so that they were in a different spot from when I was having that craving. I know it sounds strange, it was actually from a movie. But then after that it was running, and then after that it was working out, and then it was reading, and then I didn't have time to do anything because I was in grad school. But one thing that I do continuously, and one thing that's happened for me through all of that, is that I have a group of friends. They're all fellow social workers, Team MSW, and we're human with one another. You know, if we have something going on, we let each other know. All of us know each other. We don't get to see each other very often. You know, maybe a couple times a month if we're lucky. But we have a chat that we use every day on our phone, and we stay in contact. There's 5 of us, and they're the people who I can go to if I know I'm going through something. And they're all also in recovery. So we have that bond. But no matter if you're in recovery or not, we all share like the human condition. You know, we all struggle. The struggle is real. Yeah. It's not just the struggle of addiction. It's not just the struggle of the opioid epidemic. I mean, it's the struggle of life. Yeah. And it's something that all of us can relate to on some level. And I think that's one thing that we can use to connect with each other as human beings better.
Coping for me, I do a variety of things, but I always love to laugh, man, every day. Whatever it is, I like to laugh. Listen to music. I love playing sports. You know, I'm in the middle of playing again softball after so many years, and that takes me to a place. But one of the main things that gets me through is helping somebody else. That just to reach out and help someone and letting them know that I'm here to support them. And that's amazing for me, and that takes me to another level.
I conduct a series of playwriting and story sharing workshops at the Kensington storefront, in which I work with residents and transient residents to create scenes and plays about their life. You know, and a lot of the work that we do, a lot of the content that we do is called replay work, where people will bring an event that happened to them, whether it's traumatic or whether it's mundane, and we have them replay it. And in the replaying of it, they're able to work through certain types of emotions that they may not have had the opportunity to work through. This type of distancing has people sort of embody the emotion rather than just feel the emotion, but really sort of like take it outside of the intellectual and sort of like express it outside. So the work that I do becomes more of just a moment of pause and reflection for the individual.
For me, I guess it's just every day getting up and facing every day in terms of the reality of what it means to be who I am. I really am concerned every day about the world around me. I write a lot, maybe write too much. I think a lot, maybe too much. The reality for me is that I'm aware of the stress in my life. And so there's a certain amount of stress that you can predict and you can manage. And there's a certain amount of stress you just gotta let go. Yeah. You know, we all have, come into contact with crises. And the one thing you gotta remember about a crisis is very little you can do about it until it reaches its peak. And so you gotta be able to let it go. And I've got to the point in time in my life now where I'm old enough to feel okay with letting it go. I don't have anything to prove anymore. And so for me, it's just every day I just got to get up and feel that I can face that kind of, struggle. The other thing is this, is that I'm into jazz. And if you're into jazz, and my jazz goes all the way from bebop all the way into avant-garde. I gotta have my Coltrane moment in the morning. I gotta have my Miles in the afternoon, and then I can do like a little collage in the evening. And that's really it's an opportunity to not necessarily have to play by the rules. You can listen to something and find appreciation. I often tell people, they say, what's good music to you? And I say, if it liberates your head, your heart, or your hips, it's good music. You know what I mean? And so the reality for me is that coping and dealing with the stress of the life around me, and in terms of being who I am, it's just being able to relate to just some sound. In fact, I always like to tease people, say it's the drums. It's the drums, the revolution will not be televised.
So I think I want to open up maybe for like one comment. If anybody out there maybe has a question or comment, you can probably have space for like one. If anybody wants to ask anything.
I'll ask a question. Okay.
We'll make sure that maybe it's looking to one person to answer the question as well.
So I'm lucky enough not to have been an addict, but I have many friends and close ones and loved ones who have been addicts or have come through recovery. And a question that I always have is, and maybe this is different for every person, but is there anything that a friend or loved one could have done or said to you on the way down or when you were at bottom that would have helped you on your way to recovery or gotten you into recovery faster? Or is that something that is completely outside of the control of the people around you?
There's one thing I would say, and that is the best thing I learned after the fact is that the best thing you can do with somebody who was out of control is set limits for yourself. There's no saving someone who does not want to be saved. But if you save yourself, sometimes that might be the trigger to help that other person, because you've now set a limit that you're not going to go over. And I think that for me, there were some people around me that were important to me that set some limits and wouldn't go over those limits with me. So I think that, and then one thing I remember for me with people who I struggled with in their addiction was the fact that the best thing I could do for me was set limits with them. If I really loved them, I would set limits with them. And if I really cared, for me, I would set limits with them.
Yeah, everybody doesn't have to answer it like one wants to. If not, we'll just close it out.
I got something quick. So I used to run a recovery house, and so I worked a lot with the parents who had kids in the recovery house that I was running. And all of them asked the same question. And it wasn't until I'm a child of an alcoholic, and it wasn't until I was getting my own father into treatment numerous times that I understood that Roland is very right here. You kind of have to love from a distance. If you wanted to say something, like, it sounds like, I'm not going to delve into much here, but don't feel guilty, There's a part of you that thinks that there's some magic bullet. Like, everybody that I've talked to who doesn't work in this space, they all want an answer of what did you do? What worked for you? What could I say to somebody? And there is no answer. There's nothing. And every person is different. So that one thing that you can say to them, it might actually be a huge trigger. When they're ready, let me not use those words, but you'll know what the right thing to say is and when the right time to say it is. But first, give yourself permission to also have space and to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. Because addiction can be a manipulative disease.
Last comment.
Yeah, coming from my experience, no. There's exactly what they said. The only way that I actually got myself and willing and able and wanting to go away was when I lost completely everything there was. There was nothing that anyone could say or do to me that would make me go or want to get better unless I wanted to get better on my own. Now, what I do with people, I'll plant a seed. Like, yo, there's a better way to live, man. You know, and then leave it at that. But for me and my own safety and my recovery, I can't have friends like that. You know, I just, you know, I'll plant a seed. Yo, here's my phone number. You know, when you're ready, give me a call. And